Okay, lies I was told about collaborative editing. All right, so to get started, I'm Alex. I work on a collaboratively editable text editor at my day job. My motivation for giving this talk is that when we started trying to figure out how we were going to build the product that we wanted to build, we had a really hard time getting practical advice. And I would say like a good amount of the stuff that was written on the internet turned out to not be that helpful / be wrong. And my motivation to giving this talk is that I want you to learn from my pain. I'm going to tell you what I understand to be the truth as I understand it now. And that's my goal. My goal is just that. So I'm just gonna do three things. I'm gonna talk about stuff that surprised us, stuff that we think you'll want to know, and then if we have time, I'm gonna go over a very simple example that pulls all of this together. It turns out collaborative editing is not like a ton of code to write, but it's hard. It's hard to find out the exact lines of code to write. It's very hard. So, oh, right, okay, this is a note to myself. Back end, front end, full stack. If you identify as a front end engineer, could you raise your hand, please? Okay, back end engineer. Full stack. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to show you the app so that you guys have context on what I'm talking about. This is not a pitch, but because we're talking about collaborative editing, I want you to understand how these lessons got applied to our context, because your context could be completely different. So to start things off, I have two windows open. I have local development, which occasionally crashes, and then I have the actual app. So a couple of things. So our aspiration is basically to be a modern docs platform like Google Docs or Notion, except collaborative, like has all the bells and whistles of like, embedded buttons and widgets and stuff like that. But also everything that you see is just markdown files on disk in Git repositories. So just, again, this is just context. You can hate the product or not, but like this is for better and for worse what we built. So if I type stuff like the quick brown fox, jumped over, et cetera, you can see that it's synced down to this other window. This goes through the internet. This is not tunneled on localhost or whatever. And when I say it's Git, what I mean is like this is a markdown file on disk, right, on my local disk, and I can commit it to a Git repository, but it's also collaboratively edited, okay? So the reason why this is important is because we are fundamentally trying to build, when we set out on this process, I think we tried to do something that is very, we did not see a lot of other products do, which is to build something that's both intensely collaborative and also intensely local, right? There are not that many products that have both of these things together, and that's the context. That's the context about the product that I think is important to understand. Because it's local first, there's a bunch of stuff that we do that we care about. So, for example, you can have like fenced code blocks, markdown style, and you can do like echo hello world or whatever. And then you can like run the shell script. So it's sort of fundamentally for developers. It's fundamentally programmable. Let me see. I think this is the staging variant. So when I say programmable, I mean like, for example, we do all production releases. It's an app, so you don't want to continuously release like a website. We do all production releases out of the application. Meaning that we have these like widgets which are written in JavaScript. If I wanted to release, this is the list of commits that would go into this release, and then I'd put my name in, and then I'd click the release button or whatever. Right. So, like it or not like it, the point is that the product is supposed to be programmable, very fundamentally programmable in JavaScript, very fundamentally local first, and also very fundamentally collaborative. Okay. Make sense? If you have questions, just sort of shout them at me. Okay. So that's the product context. I think that is supposed to make the rest of the talk make sense. So, okay, so when I say local for, okay, so just wrap it up. We have, so when we wanted to build a product that is local first, like literally files on your literal disk in literal Git repositories, but also collaborative and also programmable, okay? And Electron, right? Right? Don't tell Martin, it's actually Tauri. Okay, so to kick us off, I just wanted to start off with like a tiny quiz. So let's say we have a document. The document has just a paragraph that says the color of pomegranates, okay? The color of pomegranates. There's Bob, okay? Bob's going to make an edit, and there's Alice. And Alice is going to make an edit. So Bob is British, and so he changes the color of, like, the word color to have you, right? Because Bob is British. And Alice just deletes the paragraph, okay? So you have two concurrent editors of the document. And let's say they're offline. They've made these edits, and now they're going to come online, okay? What should happen here? Okay, so the options are empty document, the color of pomegranates, British style, something else entirely. So raise your hand if you think it should be empty document. Raise your hand if you think it should be color of pomegranates, British style. Something else entirely. Okay, right. Oh, Alan, what do you think? Oh, you went to my talk. You don't count. So somebody tell me what you think it should be that's something else entirely who didn't go to my talk. Yes.
Merge conflict.
Merge conflict. That's a good answer. I'll accept merge conflict. Anything else? Any other ideas here? Yes. Both of them? Yeah, that's reasonable. Yes. You? The same. Just throw away both edits. These are all super reasonable. Okay, here's what actually happens. Something else entirely. So if you voted for that, good job. At Cascadia.js, by the way, it was like pretty evenly split between between these three options, which I thought was pretty interesting. But being mostly full stack, I'm guessing maybe we've all been around the block a couple of times. The actual document contains only the letter U. Okay, only the letter U. In every single collaboration system we tried, YJS, Paratext, ShareJS, AutoMerge, they all produce exactly the same thing, which is a document consisting entirely of the letter U. No other words, just the letter U, okay? So I was confused by this. I don't know about the rest of you. I was very surprised by this. I feel like, if you look at the YJS README, it says, rich text editing, offline editing, version snapshots appears to be something that we are trying to support. The ShareJS library says it works with any amount of lag from 0 to an extended holiday, okay? Paratext says edit independent copies of a document. The notion people are like, CRDTs are awesome for... I feel like this should work, right? Like, I feel like there should be an answer here, and I was very surprised that it's not. And when I bring it up to people, I was told, sometimes slightly angrily by CRDT researchers, that this is like a solved problem, that we know how to do this. I work on a text editor. My friends, I am in the market for a silver bullet here. I want this to... I want to buy your software. Right, but alas, I have reached the acceptance phase, and I'm ready for you to learn from my pain. Okay. So let's talk about direct editing conflicts. Okay, the color of pomegranates, right? So we did a lot of user testing. Okay, so we took these libraries, we put them in front of actual human users, and we said, if you had this document, and this was, what do you think the result should be? And then when they inevitably chose the wrong result, we would tell them what the real result is, and they would say, that is, you've corrupted my document. Like, if you put this in front of users, they view the results of these libraries as data corruption in like 100% of cases, okay? Straight up. So, not an algorithms problem. I wish it was, right? Algorithms are awesome. They're easy to implement, or at least once you implement them, you're done with it. At least hopefully. But it's not an algorithms problem, right? It's a UX problem. Okay, so this is the number one thing that I want to convince you of. There is not a silver bullet here. Again, I wish there was, but there's not a silver bullet, okay? So let's build some intuition for this. So let's say we have two Postgres databases, okay? Normal Postgres databases. You have Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob are writing their data to the two different Postgres instances, okay? So if we just put CRDTs between the Postgres instances, all of the writes are going to be good, right? Like, it'll just magically figure all this stuff out, right? No, obviously not. No, like, ask any DBA. Obviously, this is not, like, this doesn't actually work, right? There's no magic bullet. There's a reason why Postgres has this really intense replication protocol, and it takes a lot of work to get it exactly right in a way that doesn't lose your user's data, okay? So I guess my main question, from an intuition perspective, is, like, if one of these Postgres shards happens to be a desktop app, why do we suddenly think that it's different? Okay, so I wish it was an algorithms problem. I really think at this point, my personal experience, all of the wishful thinking, all of the time and effort we put into this, I really think that there is no silver bullet here. Okay. So what can we do? So after this, I'm going to admit we were a little bit dejected. We were hoping that, I'm a distributed systems engineer by trade. I'm not a front-end person by trade. I was hoping there was like a correct answer to this. And what I came away from this is an even more basic lesson than I thought I would have going into this, which is that the number one tenet of UX is that your users have to be able to predict what happens to their data, right? That's the number one tenet of UX. If your users cannot predict what's going to happen to their data, they're going to have a bad time. They're going to have a bad time. Okay, right. So shouldn't be controversial to say, but I think it kind of is. So what can we do? Okay, so given that the users think that the results of these reconciliation routines for direct editing conflicts are, did I cover what a direct editing conflict is? If I didn't, I'm sorry, I have like a very bad memory. By direct editing conflict, I mean that you have two users who have edited the exact same piece of text inside the document, okay? So on a direct editing conflict, users view the results as data corruption, okay? You can often recover if it's not directly direct editing conflict, like you edit text here and here, you can usually recover from that somewhat gracefully. You cannot recover from a direct editing conflict. They view that result as data corruption. Sorry if that wasn't clear earlier. The number one UX win you can have by a huge margin is literally just presenting information that helps people stop themselves from having direct editing conflicts. Okay, in our case, it's like a little like the little UX marker, right? Like you show people where other people are in the document, okay, and then they avoid direct editing conflicts. That's the number one thing that you can do from a UX perspective, given that users view the results as data corruption. You can't always do that, right? We want to be offline first, right? Going back, I mean, you remember the app demo, right? So we know that you can't always do this. If you can't do that, the only other answer that I have for you, well, there's actually two other answers that I have for you. One is to model your domain so that you have fewer editing conflicts, okay? So this is linear, right? Linear is an issue tracker. How often are you editing literally the same issue at the exact same time as somebody else? Probably not that often, right? So their user model is sort of natively separated. They've modeled their domain so that users are less likely to run into each other. But if you boot up the linear app and you create an issue and you edit it in one browser and edit it in another browser and you're offline, you come back online, they just collide, right? And the last writer actually wins. You probably didn't notice that because they did a good job modeling the domain so that there are no conflicts, right? So if you can't do that, as some of you said, I would find a UI that helps communicate what the diff actually is, right, between these two versions of the document. If you truly can't avoid those things, those are the three answers that I have. After spending a lot of time trying to build a product that makes sense where users can predict what happens to their actual data at the end of all of this stuff, all these machines running around mutating your data, these are the three answers that I have for you. Okay? And that's it. Those are the only three that I have. Side note about last write wins. Okay, so depending on your domain, like if you're building something that is relatively low conflict, you may be tempted to use last write wins. I personally, I think the thing that you have to understand about last write wins is it very much depends on the domain model, like the domain model being relatively conflict-free. What last write wins actually gives you in a domain where you have a lot of conflicts, like document editing, is that the person who's least connected to the internet and therefore most likely to have the incorrect document is most likely to ruin the document for everybody else. That's what that means. That's what last write wins is, okay? Generally speaking, you have to be, I think my advice is be very honest with yourself about whether you really have a low conflict domain. If you do and it's just like personal notes, you're probably going to be fine, but like anytime you think, what you don't want to do is you don't want to build an app that privileges the people who are least likely to have the correct version of the document, right? And replacing whatever work people did with whatever work the person had when they last went offline. So, okay. Make sense? Questions, comments, thoughts? Just shout them at me. I'm happy to talk about this. There are more challenges, though. OK, so the main one is that we want our editor to run at 60 frames a second. Now, it sounds like easy, right? But you only have like 16 milliseconds to fit your work into the render window. So whatever the heck the server is doing, no matter how many editors you have, no matter how many readers you have, the work sent to you by the server has to be reconciled in 16.66 milliseconds, not more. Otherwise, you're not going to hit this goal, OK? I'm not sure how anybody does this with YJS and auto merge and paratext and stuff. It's not that I don't like the algorithms, but what we found when we actually tested this stuff, and I know it's gotten better since we tested it, especially auto merge. I think they put a lot of work into making it good. What we found is that it chewed up a lot of CPU and a lot of time, and it slowed down the editor when you had other people just writing to the doc, right? So we care a lot about this. As far as I know, this is not written on the internet anywhere. How do you build collaborative editing in a way that lets you achieve like a 60 frames per second goal? I'm not sure anybody is writing about this. Normal caveat, we couldn't get it to work. Maybe the YJS people could, but we could not get it to work. And looking at the algorithm, it seems very unlikely to me that it would be stably able to work under those circumstances. The only person I have ever seen talk about this is this one guy who explained why he batches up changes in his collaborative editing library, which we happen to use. This is the one time I've ever seen anybody ever talk about this. I hope that, as I'm giving this talk to pretty much anyone will hear it, I hope that this puts more pressure on the other libraries to know that this actually is a problem. If you're building a real app for actual humans, you don't want other people writing to slow your app down. Like, you want it always feel good. But it's not like a well-known thing yet, and I'm not quite sure why. OK, so advice. So I'm going to tell you what our stack is. This is very specific to our circumstance. Super happy to talk about the trade-offs. For rich text editing, I know that there are a bunch of different libraries out there, like Lexical and TipTap and so on and so forth. TipTap uses Prosmir under the hood. I really recommend Prosmir. Prosmir is so hard to use because it's like at the level of abstraction as a compiler middleware, but it is amazing. It is an amazing piece of engineering. They have like a decade of finding out that there's like a random weird event bubbling bug in iOS 8 and like correcting it. And in general, it is a solid, performant, wonderful piece of software that is incredibly hard to use. If you use this and you use React, which we do, you should know that they do not play well together, and you will probably encounter serious state tearing issues. Like if you play video games, like sometimes the frame gets rendered and like it's half another frame. They have fundamentally different, React and Prosmir have fundamentally different update loops, fundamentally different notions of state and how they should be updated, and they're not compatible at all. You have to use something like React Prosmir, which is a library from the New York Times originally, but now what those devs left the New York Times, and now they have their own sort of consultancy. I also highly recommend them. I think they're incredibly good. You should use, I think we are built on Reboot, a system called Reboot, and also a system called Cloud for Durable Objects. Basically, they give the same guarantee. I really highly recommend using one of the two. I would really strongly not recommend using like Redis paired with like Postgres. The reason is because durable objects, like the guarantee that durable objects gives you is that there's 0 or 1, like if you all connect to a document, Cloudflare's invariant is that it will make sure that there is only 0 or 1 copies of that running anywhere on planet Earth. That means you will never have a split brain problem, at least if you trust Cloudflare. And you can program them with JavaScript, so you can use the same editor library on the back end as on the front end. If you do a good job of sharding out, like every document has its own durable object room, then you can scale pretty far, and it's pretty cheap, especially relative to like Lambda. I really think you should strongly consider using durable objects or reboot.dev. There's pros and cons. Happy to talk about those. I made these slides for Cascadia.js. There's no booths here. Don't worry about that. We use Prosmir collab commit. That's the library that negotiate. So the thing about this is like, you have to understand that collaborative text editing is a databases problem, right? So everybody knows the #1 rule of computer science: don't write your own database. Makes sense. Not everybody knows the second rule of computer science, which is like, don't accidentally write a database and lie to yourself about it. If you think about what a collaborative text editor is like you have a server, and the server's job is like take transactions, detect conflicts, broadcast successful transactions to the clients, write stuff down in a log so you don't lose it and you can play it back and so on and so forth. That whole protocol where the clients agree what to do in a conflict and stuff is handled by a library plugin to Prosemirror. For us, it's Prosemirror Collab Commit. There's also just Prosemirror Collab. Both of these work. We found this one to be a little bit less chatty and a bit more reliable. It's harder to starve out people who have bad connectivity. I know we have a couple of minutes, so I'll quickly go over how collab works. I think it's not so important that the point here I want to make is like not that you need to understand every line, but more that mechanically it can be really simple if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, it's a lot of code, and it's like very hard to make it work. Okay. So there's fundamentally two APIs that we care about when we're doing collaborative. We, not you all, like what we care about when we are doing collaborative editing. They are apply, which applies a transaction to the document, or registers a client's intent to apply transaction to a document. And then there is step since, which fetches all the steps since a certain version. Okay, so for us, we're using reboot, which is kind of like durable objects. We are basically like the entirety of the code is like just this apply commit JSON and then writing it to the state object, and then at the end of this function, whatever, it's sort of like immer. I don't know if you guys have ever used like Redux or whatever, but it's like you have this like object, and as you mutate it, that gets written down into RocksDB. Super handy, makes the code really, really short. If you're building on durable objects, it's very much the same thing. You're going to have to implement your own two-phase commit. I can talk to you about that later. But this is all of apply. This is like very close to our production implementation of apply, minus the authentication stuff, which I took out, which is not that relevant to what you guys are doing. Changes. Changes takes a version and then just gives you the set of steps that have happened since a version, and then the clients can pick that up and use this library to like rebase their changes on top of the last known good committed version. Okay. We did make a library. You can put it up in there. I gave it to the reboot folks, but we wrote it. but I don't work at Reboot. I just like them. But if you want, you can use this QR code to go check it out. Liza was told about collaborative editing. I think that's about time, almost exactly. So. Yeah, Q&A, questions, comments, happy to chat after. The actual reason we're here is we're hiring. So if you're looking for work, we would love to talk to you. If you want to work on stuff like this, where it's like pretty hard and there's not that much stuff that's written about it, which is good, we have a lot of problems like that. Oh, also, it is a Towery app. I'm happy to talk about that as well. So, questions, comments, tomatoes. No comments, no questions. I take that personally.